Good morning, everybody. My name's Steve Benham. I've also got a colleague and partner, Pavel Kowalski, online. And so thank you all for attending. For me, the message I hope you'll take away from this webinar is that forecasts should be the main focus of FP&A departments and not, as they seem to be at the moment, a bit of an afterthought. And a little bit pejoratively, I call that getting finance to be fortune tellers rather than scorekeepers, and I hope you're not offended by that. So let's move on. Let's see if I can get my down button to work. So this is just a little bit about my background. I've had 20 years experience as largely CFO of venture capital backed companies, and then I moved on to enterprise performance management and had a number of roles ranging from a lot of them are consulting, that's delivering enterprise performance management solutions. Had some practice lead experience in a couple of my companies, and then in 2015 formed Profit And with Pavel and one other partner, and so I remain a partner and advisor to Profit And. So what's the mantra that we hear a lot from the retail sector? Well, it's still location, location, location. And then the question that comes to my mind is, what should it be in FP&A? And I believe that the mantra we should be shouting loud is forecast, forecast, forecast. And during this webinar, I'll explain why I believe that with some stories, some war stories, really, from my experience. I would caveat that a bit. When I say forecast, forecast, forecast is the most important. I mean for the role of management information that's supporting executive decisions. Clearly, if your role is only control, then you don't really need to forecast. And regulatory reporting sort of seems to focus on forecasting to the end of the financial year, if at all. So Deloitte did a study a few years ago, and they came up with only 37% of their respondents reforecast every month. That's quite a lot of frequency for forecasting, but I think most people do forecasts, but they're not timely, and they take far too long to prepare, and for that reason they don't get done in the right accuracy or the right frequency. So they're often not to the correct planning horizon, and by that I mean companies have different planning horizons. Like maybe an oil exploration company might be 30-40 years they expect to exploit an oil field, whereas an IT or a software development company might only have a planning horizon of, say, 2 years, and after that they might expect to completely revisit the software and rewrite it and launch other products onto the market. The other thing as finance that I've certainly experienced myself is that we don't really have the systems and the haven't in the past had the technology, and because our focus hasn't been on forecasting, when we are asked to forecast, we're sort of not ready for it, and we end up having to do things very quickly, and that really results in some pretty unsafe assumptions just to get some numbers in front of the decision makers. So how do we change? Sorry, a bit more evidence from Deloitte, and when they did this, they found that only 30% of forecasting were rolling forecasts, and I've added to that that forecasts really need to support the entity's planning horizon. They need to support the management decisions to the planning horizon, which of course might be different for different decisions. So there's a number of hurdles, I think, that we face, and the one I believe in, one of them which I believe in, is really the whole training program for accountants. Is we're trained a lot of the time to be regulatory report producers and backwards looking, and dare I suggest we're trained to be scorekeepers and controllers more than we are fortune tellers. And I believe we must become fortune tellers. And let me tell you a little story from my past. I remember very proudly presenting almost my first set of management accounts to my new chief executive in a company, Metro Products, that I was working in some years ago. And after a few months, the CEO had a quiet chat with me and said, well, these are fantastic, Steve, these management accounts. But first of all, they keep on talking about over and under accruals. And frankly, Steve, all you're doing is explaining the mistakes in the previous accounts. And I'm not really interested in that. And furthermore, Steve, all the decisions I make are about the future, and I'd like you to give me your best view of the future. And that thing comes back to me a lot, and that's why I believe as finance, we need to focus on forecasts. So then the question is, how do we do that? Well, if you focus on forecasts, of course, you need to use whatever facts are at your disposal. And the monthly management accounts are some facts. They're pretty, they're reasonably accurate. They are reality, and so we need to use them. And later on in this webinar, we'll talk about some of the things that different companies do to achieve a forecast. But assuming you can achieve a good forecast on a timely basis with the right level of information in it, then you've got the baseline really for doing scenarios. And when the executive team asks you to run a scenario, maybe on a new product or a new company we're buying or something like that, or a new customer that was a major contract, often that creates sort of panic and pandemonium, because the decision makers want the answer to that question normally yesterday, but the next day would be good enough. Well, we often have to make them wait a couple of weeks to get round to fitting this in to our schedule, because we don't have the right systems in place to produce these forecasts and scenarios, and we don't have the right focus. And if you do a regular forecast, then your planning, your budget and your planning should be just another iteration of the forecast, so that all of the effort and pain that currently goes into most companies producing annual plans and budgets is greatly diminished. And in my view, forecasts should be at the very heart of what we do as an FP&A department. So let me give you an example. So this is quite an simple example. This is Profit and clearly we're not an enormous company, and we are a relatively simple business. We deliver consultancy services to our clients. So we do a rolling forecast, a monthly rolling forecast. It's updated frequently. Whenever we have some new information, we update it. And that feeds into a 2 or 3 year plan that we do every so often, normally about once a year. So how do we do that? Well, we are on the whole trained as accountants, so we do like facts. We like to see reality. So our rolling forecast is our latest view on the contracts that are in progress. So we're already contracted and we have projects in progress, and that gives us sort of visibility for sort of 3 to 6 months hence, sometimes as long as 9 or 12 months, but in general it's only 6. We layer on top of that information from our CRM system, which in this case is HubSpot, but we are very realistic. We like, again, back to facts. You know, if we make a proposal to a client, that's a long way down the sales cycle, and it's real. You know, we wouldn't have made that effort to make a proposal without it. So we do layer in proposals with different levels of probability of it actually happening into the forecast. And of course, there's a level of judgment, especially in the 2 or 3 year plan, because our planning horizon is not 2 or 3 years, really. You know, we can only have visibility of projects 6 to 12 months ahead. So we do make some executive estimates to do that. And in some businesses, they call that forecasting the white space. Of course, we exercise some judgment in the 12-month rolling forecast, but it's fairly limited. We want to see real cash flows and real profit from our 12-month rolling forecast. So, of course, that's a fairly simple example. Larger companies, right up to large enterprise, use all sorts of trends, can use and do use all sorts of trends and predictive analysis. And companies, especially those with a sort of high volume consumer, sort of business to consumer type business, are starting to use artificial intelligence to analyze their sales and then be sort of more clever and predictive about how those trends are really going. And that's probably the Vodafone is a good example of that, and of companies that could use AI, and it also the sort of airline industry has very high volumes of passengers and can use AI to be more predictive on where their sales are likely to be going forwards. Later, we're going to come to a more complex type of forecasting using, which is particularly appropriate to manufacturing and CPG, to do with bill of materials. So we talked about one of the hurdles being sort of the training and the sort of legacy approach of accountants. And I can say that because I am an accountant. The other one is technology, and historically technology has been a real blocker to delivering forecasts frequently at the right level of detail to support management decisions. And this quadrant compares the flexibility and complexity, or the ability of planning and forecasting tools to deal with flexibility and complexity. So, we all still use Excel, and quite rightly. It wouldn't be such a widely used tool unless it was extremely flexible. But fundamentally, it's a desktop tool, and when you try to use it in a large enterprise or enterprise-wide environment, it begins to fail, and you get the version control issues, you get errors, you get very slow calculation speeds, etc., etc. And for that reason, large enterprise particularly has implemented more traditional enterprise performance management tools, in particular maybe from the SAP or Oracle or Infor Stable, but they do handle complexity. They're not that flexible actually, because they traditionally have enormous cost, very expensive consulting required to make any modifications to them and to maintain them, and that in turn things have to be prioritized, and that causes delay. So the reality of these tools is that they're really, although functionally they can handle complexity, because of the cost and delay, they end up being not being able to handle the complexity because nobody wants to wait or spend the money on it. Now, before we started Profitan, we reviewed a number of tools. We selected Anaplan because it is very flexible and it handles a high degree of complexity. And as you'll see in a minute, is on a single cloud platform. Really, any finance people who can handle mid-range complexity of Excel can model in Anaplan and understand what it's doing, but it is an enterprise-wide tool as well. Just carrying on the technology front. So this is really, for about 3 years, I worked on a project of Saudi Airlines, and they had multiple source systems. And this is typical of the sort of traditional approach to enterprise performance management. There's multiple transaction systems. They had sort of booking systems and aircraft maintenance systems and all sorts of things like that. And because of that, they needed another component, which is a data load and transformation tool. In the case of SAP, that might be SAP Data Services. And that then transform the data into a data mart. And anybody that's trying to implement a data mart or a data warehouse will know that can take years. And obviously, it's often an excuse for not doing anything. And then in Saudi Airlines, we had, in this case, it was a SAP sort of stable, and we had SAP profitability and cost management, which was a modeling tool. We used SAP BPC to collect data remotely from about 80 different airports. That also was integrated into the solution. And then we used SAP BI, the old business objects tools, to produce reports. And then that also enabled us to do the multidimensional reporting for management purposes. So as you can see, there were a number of different components in this solution, all needed stitching together, and it all took a long time and very expensive to deliver. Compare that to the more transformational architecture of Anaplan, where Anaplan really includes all of these tools within it, and it's really a single cloud platform, and it saves enormous time and cost to deliver flexible and complex solutions. Finally, let me tell you the story of Orkla. I referred earlier to bill of materials. So Orkla, you may not have heard of, is a Norwegian food manufacturer. They produce the largest number of pizzas. I believe that's even in Europe. One or two other quite specialist Norwegian products like tin sausages, which the Norwegians absolutely adore. And they, like many companies, they used Excel for all of their planning and forecasting. In fact, the reality is they didn't really do much forecasting at all because it was so clumsy and difficult to do. And as it says here, they had all sorts of problems with Excel being slow, crashing, and etc. And all sorts of spreadsheets which were redundant and things like that. And they really couldn't scale the spreadsheet solution for any of the growth. So for them, we've implemented Anaplan in integrated business planning solution, and I'm not going to go through all of this because really I want to focus on forecasting today. But we have implemented some allocations, OPEX planning, CAPEX, workforce planning, right through to integrated P&L balance sheet and cash flow. What I want to focus on is the new product launch process. So if you imagine a manufacturer having to produce new products constantly for 3 or 4 major supermarket customers, that's exactly what Auckland need to do. And the new product launch process involves a number of iterations of sales forecasting for those new products. And that in turn requires them to calculate the margin on these new products. And for that, they need to have a bill of materials in the system, which gives them, the cost per gram of or kilo of various components or menu items of that food product. So that's the bill of materials. And the functionality that we've implemented here in this new product launch process is equally appropriate for forecasting the sort of repeat year-on-year product sales, where the bill of materials can give them the gross margin. And that this solution allows them to do iterative forecasting. The bill of materials functionality in particular allows them to run repeat scenarios. Maybe if the market price they decide is too high, they can reduce the price and see the effect on their profitability. And really, this is a massive step forward in their ability to respond to the market. So I'm done now. I'm going to hand over to Pavel to do a demonstration of forecasting in Anaplan. We'll leave a few minutes at the end if you have some questions to ask.
Okay, thanks, Steve, for all that information around the kind of why forecasting is so important. So let's show a bit how this could look like in the world where we don't have Excel, but we actually have this process embedded into a technology like Anaplan. So as Steve mentioned, it's a cloud technology. So all we need actually to access is a browser. So I'm in a browser and access the internet. All the information is in the cloud. And what you see is one of the many of the applications that you can have for different parts of your business. We're looking at financial planning application. It's the front end of Anaplan that end users interact. And what we started off with is the landing page showing the potential user which parts of the process he can perform in this tool. You can navigate through to the hyperlinks on the page, also through the different sections of the menu. Everything to make it more user-friendly and faster. So what Steve talked about is how important this is, the forecasting, how we can make it faster. I think for me, I will add often what I see with clients, they are doing this quarterly or even less frequent. And it's because it's so time consuming, so hard to collect all the data, validate from different parts of the business. But with the technology like Anaplan, you can improve or speed up this time of the data collection, remove that all manual effort. And so it's not so daunting for everyone, especially for the finance team. So what you can do is you can run it more often, move from quarterly to monthly, or change it to even rolling forecast, which we can show you as well how this could look like. But also you could be encouraged to do it at a more granular level that you do this right now. So yeah, let's have a look how this could look like. So let's look at actually creating a plan. And what we can start with is having an example of dashboard that could give us a view that we could slice and dice across here through those page selectors through different regions, in this case, rolling up to our total company. The second selector we see is actually different versions of the forecast. So what that means is, as we're moving along during the year, we have a process of updating actuals in the system. So all the numbers we actually see for those quarters of FY21 will reflect the actual data being loaded and forecast and reforecasted data for the future. And I'll move on and show that a bit shortly. But as with any company, the process of planning starts at the top, where we want to look at specific business units or slice of the company, and we want to do some analysis of the prior year, establishing kind of a baseline for our future year. And then here's an example of how we could play around with creating specific initiatives where that end users could create through this button. For each initiative, we have a number of goals that we can add, and we decide here which part of the P&L we want to impact and in what way. We can change those percentages and the data and see the impact immediately in the tables above. And we have a clever functionality here to kind of activate and deactivate the impact of specific initiatives here, and come to conclusions and come to the business with the decision how we want to take this forward, and basically creating a high level view of our financial position for the next year. So that's very kind of top level. But then we're moving on to actual planning and breaking it down into how we work with the P&L, looking at the top line. Here's an example of how top-down target setting exercise could look like in a company, in a system like Anaplan. What we're looking at is quite a global view, broken down into very specific regions, looking at the historical sales again, and having ability at this high level to adjust the growth targets. By the way, all this information I'm changing keeps track of the changes. Pretty much every cell in Anaplan has this functionality, giving you the confidence in the data and traceability. So I've just changed the target for North America, giving me kind of 607 in total. And what we can do here is the tool will automatically, that's how it's set up right now, we'll break it down based on the prior year sales, giving that increase of 10%. But what I can do is decide that I won't actually change this target. I think that United States should have slightly bigger target, and I can do that by putting the percentage, activating override. What actually I can do is, and what happens if we're keeping the top target for the North America, so we're increasing the United States, and the remaining goes in proportionally to Mexico and Canada. Maybe we want to keep the growth of 10% for Mexico. We can kind of do that, and that will again recalculate and leave remaining in Canada. Once we're happy with the targets for the regions, we can go level below, and we can do the same for segments, business units, or whatever the kind of underlying business model for our business is. And again, we can perform the same functionality of overriding those targets. And as we've been doing this on the annual basis, then we would like to perhaps break it down into months, and various potential options are available here. We could, for the products that I've just selected, we could allocate this seasonality based on the straight line, perhaps maybe based on the prior year, and that will recalculate automatically as kind of logic defined, and we can have a custom driver where we can just use this hyperlink, for example, and go in and play with the percentages of this data. Right, so that's a top-line planning. Now let's have a look how a planning from the bottom could look like. So then the idea is then you have everything in one place. So a good example of planning for the kind of bottom up would be a situation where we have a given region in this case. So we are at the bottom of our hierarchy in our model, where previously we've been looking at geos and countries. Now we work from the very bottom of the organization. We have now a new dimension added here of products. Let's look at those products. This particular product, what we can store centrally is the price book. Again, we can have hyperlink to go in and kind of adjust those centrally and manage that. But what's interesting in terms of forecasting and how this can be automated and made user-friendly for the planners is I'm looking at my December forecast, meaning I've got the actuals up to December loaded, and I have a planning horizon and periods open for editing from January onwards, so I can edit any of those numbers and update my forecast. And when we changing from one forecast to another, let's just change to March, within a bit of a skip. Again, you will notice that you can set up a plan in a way that it's keeping the planning horizon for the set number of months. It could be 12 or 24, how many we need, and it's kind of keeps rolling and giving us a copy and copying across the numbers from the previous forecast and giving ability for planners to update. So that makes this planning, what I said at the beginning, much easier, much more automated. You don't have to re-enter all the numbers, and you can easily kind of compare those forecasts as well, and what you had previously, what you're planning this time, and so on. So hopefully that kind of inspires you and get you thinking about how you could improve that in your company. What I wanted to show you as well is how a bottom-up cost center cost planning looks like. Again, we've got our forecasts. I'll go back to the kind of December one, and what we can have for OpEx planning. An example of kind of workflow management or status management, building different type of review stage, notifying perhaps management to review and approve different parts of the OpEx forecast. And one example I wanted to show you is many ways that we could model those the planning of the costs, the travel and entertaining, for example, could be based on drivers. So what we have is we are planning in this model our headcount. So with the Department of United Sales Direct Sales, would have the headcount flowing from the personal planning module, and with the central assumptions around the different types of travel, we could automatically have the calculations going again. Everything about the speed and making it easier. So there's less data entry, more kind of reviewing, and to also make it possible to forecast faster, forecast more often. And all that is kind of wrapped up into kind of a status where we can review where different parts of the business, at which part of the process of forecasting are, so we can have a good central control over that. From the point of view of completing the budget, but also from the point of view of our process, where in process we are, and who the responsible people are. All that, all that elements of planning, of data input, aggregation, kind of reporting analysis is captured here. And finally, of course, there's no point in doing forecasting and reporting if we don't have actuals and we can't do the comparison. So that's an example of how this could be done. You're loading your actuals. We've got our forecast, and we can that kind of how potentially analysis of this could be done in a plan. Again, ability to have different type of functionalities here, like adding comments to explain the variances, to make this into account, maybe when reforecasting the OPEX, taking into account what the variances to date are. I'll stop here because, as you can see from this menu, there's a lot of things I could show. If that's of interest, please contact us. We can book a dedicated demo for you where we can go and explore the areas that you're interested in. Yeah, happy to show all of that and see how we could help you with the journey to improve forecasting in your organization.
The return on investment from implementing Anaplan is frankly enormous. You can see there's sort of typically 10% workload reduction. Actually, it's often a lot more than that. The speed of producing plans and forecasts is, we've seen people reduce it from 6 months down to 2 weeks, but more than anything, I think, is the effect on the quality of decision making, and I think that's probably really the main point, but it's quite difficult to measure sometimes. So I'll leave this slide up. That's a few of our clients. As you can see, the blue on the map of Europe and a little bit of Asia with Turkey we have clients in all these countries. And we have our team. Consultants are largely based in the UK, Italy, and Poland.